comforting. It's weird because ever since I was a kid, I never really liked math that much. Probably because they force you to memorize timetables and big numbers, which make my brain hurt. But these past few months have made me realize that damn, studying math was somewhat relieving. Okay, this might not sound very relatable, but hear me out on this. See, I took pure science in school, which sounds dope now that I say it out loud. But basically, adding on to the core subjects, I had to study physics, chemistry, biology, and additional mathematics. Which was terrible for me because I'm more of an art-oriented guy myself. These subjects, even including the core subjects, gave me headaches. Other than English, they made me feel dead inside. Malay is technically my first language, but damn does it not feel like it when I'm writing a paragraph. I suck at memorizing things, so these three were a lost cause. Chemistry and physics makes me want to vomit trying to understand whatever it is they're trying to tell me. So what's left? Math. And add math, but we don't talk about the latter. Now, you see, math is still hard, but the fact is, and you may not like it, is that once you get the hang of a certain formula or concept, it's pretty much the same question over and over again. It gets easier. To me, bear with me here, I've always thought of it as a game. A JRPG maybe, where I needed to clear a boss fight. Exam. And every enemy, the question in the boss's stage needed certain skills or a combo of certain skills. Formulas and logical reasoning. And maybe they even needed certain weapons and armor that are much harder to obtain. And before every big boss fight, you had to grind. Study. Which was always the most boring part of the process. Yeah, I'm a bit of a gamer. What am I writing? And yeah, you could say the same thing for the other subjects, but I feel like math's concepts are a lot more simpler. And most of the formulas that are supposed to be used are right in the front pages. It's right there. Unlike some subjects. Also, the questions are very straightforward, except maybe a little bit different in the wordings of the questions here and there. Yes, the questions, my favorite part. Okay, try to think from the teacher. The examiners? No, that's... Okay, the person who writes the exam questions perspective. You're trying to make a question using a certain formula from the syllables. But the formula's been used a bunch of times in the past year's questions, so you try to be original. You want to make it stand out. You want to be different. Hence, you make some really goofy questions. I mean, from a certain standpoint, it makes sense, but to me it's pretty entertaining. For example, we'll start off small. Okay, so yeah, we have this question here. It might get a bit wordy. In an animated game, Wreck-It Ralph, which I think is a movie, if I remember correctly, Ralph jumps from a building. At the same time, the Vanellope is like the name of the female lead, I think. Let me read the Bahasa Melayu one. Padmasih sama Vanellope, yeah, that's the name. Classic, translation error. But like, yeah, Vanellope will throw a ball towards Ralph to drop him. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, she hates him. I forgot. Okay. The graph of the function y equals c plus x minus x to the power of 2 represents the movement of Ralph, and the graph of the function y equals 2x represents the movement of the ball. Y represents the distance in meters and x is the time in seconds. And the question is, state the equation of the axis of symmetry for the graph of the above quadratic function. And you might think that sounds really complicated, but really you just have to use the axis of symmetry formula, negative b per 2a. And you might think negative b per 2a, that's from the quadratic formula. This is gonna get really boring. But yeah, to see which one is the quadratic function, you can look at the graph. If it's curved, it's a quadratic function, so it's Ralph. We can take its function, y equals 6 plus x minus x to the power of 2, rearrange it, and then put it in the formula. We get the answer. And then for the second question, state the time and height the ball hits Ralph. We know that the time is x and the height is y. And we also know when Ralph hits the ball means that they intersect in the graph. And when they intersect, x is 2, which means 2 seconds, and y is 4, which means 4 meters. That's the answer. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, I won't lie, it's a really cute question. But yeah, the next one is a bit weird. Amar wants to buy a cup of drink. There are 2 options of drinks that Amar can choose, either tea or coffee. The probability that Amar buys tea is 3 over 5. That's very suspicious that the question writer would know that, but okay. If he chooses tea, the probability that he adds on boba is 2 over 7. How would you know? How would they know that? Who wrote this? Meanwhile, if he chooses to buy coffee, the probability that he chooses coffee without boba is 7 over 8. I remember when I first read this, I just could not understand the premise of the question. Even if you're best friends with someone, you would not know their percentage of wanting a certain food or drink. Yeah, oh yeah, Dan's gonna buy a packet of Doritos, but there's a 20% chance that we also buy no one does that. That's creepy. That's the same level as Taylor Swift fans. It's such a weird thing to do. But yeah, those were the 2 questions that I thought would be fun to talk about. Back to the animation. When answering the exam papers, these were the type of questions to keep me going. They get a decent giggle out of me every time, and they're also really memorable. I'm not really that academically smart, and like I said before, memorizing isn't one of my good points. So being able to remember how certain questions are structured were especially helpful. And the thing is, in my last 2 years of school, my math scores started off being extremely terrible. But due to a change of mindset, among other things, I got a bit better at math. And then people started to ask me to teach them. And then my social anxiety came. To them, it's not a big deal. But to me, everything is a big deal, okay? I feel like teaching people is a great way to understand something from a different perspective. But I do feel bad because there are times where I teach people something that I sorta understand, but I'm not really confident in, which is why I would teach it from the start, so that I myself can also get a better grasp of it too. Which, depending on the person I'm teaching, is good, or it will just sound condescending, which is not what I intended. But it's sorta cool to see because everyone's different in a way. There are some that have asked me the same question 3 times across the span of 6 months and didn't even remember that I've taught them the question before, which makes me question my effectiveness as a teacher. And there are some that do remember what I taught them, and it makes me really happy. A lot of them could also be categorized in different groups. The first one would be the typical I hate math sort of people. But the thing is, when they start getting a few answers right, they for some reason can't stop doing math questions. The next group is the pain but barely any gain group. And the reason they're named this is because these are the people that no matter how hard they work are just unable to do numbers. They just can't do it. And to those set of people, you have my condolences. I'm sure you have many other passions that you are much more competent with, and I pray for your success. I know a lot of people that are like this and have worked very hard, much more harder than most people, especially harder than the next group of people we're gonna be talking about later, but they still get a failing grade, which sucks. This subject is just not for them, but they still have to go through it, and for that, they have my undying respect. Which can't really be said for the next group of people, the bums. These bums were the type to skip class, not study, being complete assholes, etc. Which I didn't really care about. Go live your life, I guess, it's whatever. It's just that for example, they would ask me how to answer a question, but they just wanted answers so that the teacher won't get mad at them when they get called out, or they would just take people's books and copy of them, and you might think, Dan, that's very normal. Why you gotta be such a nerd? See, all of those examples happened 2 days before the big exam. 2 days! They were more afraid that the teacher would tell on their parents than getting a failing grade. Bro, you're 17, who cares? And the parents would still be disappointed either way. Like, no joke, I'm not sure if they ever actually studied. I don't think they were even that dumb either. When they do sorta listen, I can tell that it's not hard for them to understand the concept. On our final extra class for math, I remember the teacher had me teach them, and one of them was on TikTok under the desk or something. I asked him, he denied it, whatever. I didn't have the energy to care. The exam is in 2 days, but the other one looked like he was actually listening and taking notes. I thought he was a changed man. I did. And then I looked at his notes, and it was filled with signatures. He was practicing his signatures the whole time. Look, I don't care if you want to skip classes, if you want to play volleyball with your friends 2 days before the exam started, if you want to be an entitled prick your whole life. I don't even care if you for some reason like throwing trash outside of windows, which is like really weird. I'm not a teacher. It's your life, not mine. However, I just hate it. I despise it when you waste my time. All things considered, pretty good gig. Not sure if my ex-students were to agree, but hey, you win some, you lose some. All in all, I know it's weird that I have a lot to say on a subject that I don't even study for anymore, and it's not really a big deal at all, but sometimes I get reminded of my final year of high school and just remember how hectic it was, and yet there were times when I would have to study before bed and I didn't really feel like studying the other subjects. So in the end, I would just answer some questions from math exercise book, paired with some music, in the comfort of my own room, and it would really be relaxing. It was really nice. I sorta miss it. This video took way longer than it should have. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I know it's not too good. It started off being sort of a smaller scale project while I relearn animation after like a year of not animating at all because of school. But for some reason I just wanted to make the video as good as possible, which I felt made the video a bit more watchable, but it didn't really save the video from the bad writing. I was like halfway done with the video at the time, so like I could not change it. I'm trying to improve a lot in my writing, in my animation. If you want to support me, you can, do the YouTube thing, subscribe, like. You can also support me on Patreon. It's all in the links below. And for the music, and the music are all royalty free. They're all in the description as well. And yeah, see ya.